DTF St. Louis is peak Hollywood degeneracy, and we're going to talk about it. Now, there will be spoilers for this. You are warned. As always, this content is brought to you by Barbell Apparel. It is the preferred apparel of overweight pseudo-intellectual meatheads. Why did I go all white today? Because I thought strawberry milk should be my new branding. And they also gave me my own clothing line. Why would they do that? Because I'm a pretty big deal. But seriously, check them out. It's good stuff. Code Bromley is going to get you a freebie with purchase of $99 more. This is going to make a lot more sense if you've seen the show, but if you haven't, you still get to listen to me moralize about sex and popular culture and kids these days. So there's something in it for everybody. DTF is described as a dark comedy. It's basically a whodunit murder mystery that starts with David Harbour's Floyd showing up dead, and the whole show is interrogating the people that knew him, trying to figure out who did it. Now, I started this show really excited because dark comedies are few and far between. Movies like Very Bad Things rank among my favorite, and everybody in this show has a rare artistic toolkit that allows them to take on both dramatic and comedic roles pretty effectively. So in watching the trailer, it gave a sample of what was to come. You were going to have the emotional weight of love, loss, and loneliness. That was going to be balanced with the absurdity of humans when they actually try to cope with those issues. And it was all wrapped up in a nice tortilla of murder mystery to keep you engaged week to week. I saw the trailer and I'm like, this is gonna fucking rule. I already know it. And I'm not gonna lie, despite the title of this video and everything I'm about to say after this, it mostly did rule. I finished each episode on the edge of my seat, ready to watch the next one. The performance from everyone was absolutely superb. The characters were each distinct and idiosyncratic. They were burdened by their own baggage, and it was made worse by their awkward handling of said baggage. Now, none of this is the point of this piece. I'm talking about themes in the show that relate to what I would call degeneracy that we often see in popular culture. Some of you will be here from a Matt Walsh movie review or a Crucible debate, and you'll be like, yeah, degeneracy. And some of you are going to be avid movie and art enjoyers who really like investigations into these topics and are wondering what the big fucking deal is. This is absolutely an editorial piece. Of course, I'm biased based on my own values, my own perspective, the way I see the world. However, I am going to try my best to make a logical case, so at least the assumptions I'm making about the show, about the writers, about what they intended, about the characters make sense, and then we can quibble a little bit about how I should put all that together to create an actual critique of the show. Are you ready? Does that sound like fun? Let's fucking go. Now, art very often touches on taboos. It pushes the limits of cultural norms, asks a lot of questions about our own assumptions about what is right and wrong, and it explores topics that make people uncomfortable. And I emphatically believe that it should. I'm an avid defender of edgy comedy like roast comedy, and I can't stand when self-righteous school moms start their finger wagging and they start to go on about which jokes they think are or aren't funny. And of course it gets that reaction because the comedy crosses a taboo. Now you can tell jokes that are inoffensive, that don't try to take the piss out of things that society at large generally is full of piss over. Just like I can take a Thomas Kincaid print and hang it up in my mom's living room and call it art. However, people largely understand that the value of art in all of its forms is when it starts to push these boundaries, when it makes people think, and often when it kind of makes us uncomfortable. It doesn't have to do that, but the fact that it does offers something unique to society. So why then, since I'm such a fan of people's soft velvet bubbles being popped, am I about to spend the rest of this video moralizing over the degeneracy that's present in a fictional dramatic comedy series? Well, I could do the typical response when people start getting bent out of shape, and I can just say, well, I'm special, and obviously it's different when it bothers me. But of course, that's not the case whatsoever. No, the main critique here, as with other shows and art forms, isn't with raw feelings or being uncomfortable. It's about the beliefs that creators actually have, how they infuse it into the show, how they present it as real or good, and they want you to accept it the same way. I'm solely interested in identifiable ideologies where creators, as so many creators are wont to do, critique the rest of the world and save their precious own little ideas, which they offer up to you as some type of wisdom or truth. And this is a natural thing that human beings do, which I think is why these critiques are important regardless of which side they're coming from. This is kind of like academic peer review for our pseudo-philosophical bullshit. And at the very least, it gives us something to talk about and kill some time. So what does this writer believe? How do I know that he believes it? Why do I have a problem with it? Why don't I mind my own fucking business? All these questions are about to be answered. Creating complex fiction with a lot of different characters, especially ones that are highly characterized or that are supposed to be vehicles of satire, makes discerning the beliefs of the writer actually pretty difficult unless they're going out of their way to make it obvious. Some writers are excellent at keeping the story as a faithful and logical byproduct of the decisions of each unique character and removing themselves from it. And it's a very hard thing to do. Like if I'm watching Game of Thrones, what do any of the events tell me about what George R. R. Martin believes, his politics, his faith? It doesn't tell me a goddamn thing because he's not signing off on the actions of one or condemning the actions of the other. He's just leaving the reader to interpret the actions as just so. But writers like that are very few and far between. And when writers do lead with their moral voice, it's usually just super on the nose obvious. Now, here are a few ways you can tell an author is genuinely telling you what they think. Thing number one is the straight man. You can think about Jim in The Office, or if you want a more obscure reference, Mark Brandanowitz from the early seasons of Parks and Rec. You have all these cartoonish characters behaving in absurd ways. You need at least one person to stare into the camera, make that tight-lipped smirk like, yeah, this is pretty crazy, huh? And those characters are the through line that connects the audience to what is normal. It's always a person with a more mellow disposition, somebody who lacks a lot of like over-the-top comedic expression. They're a bit more deadpan, and they tend to speak in a very matter-of-fact way. And it's a reason everybody thinks they're Jim in their own life, and it's because Jim is real. He's the one witnessing the folly of mankind and nodding knowingly into the camera. Because the straight man represents what is real and what is sane. Unfortunately, nobody's Jim. You're all lucky if you're Kevin. I feel like I'm on track to become a Creed myself. Now in this series, the straight man is Jodie Plum, played by Joyce Sunday. She's deadpan, and it's funny, but not because she's deadpan. It's because it serves as a contrast to the more animated and expressive boomer silliness of Richard Jenkins, who I can never not see as the dad from Step Brothers. He plays Detective Don Homer. He's always trying to pull rank, and they have this perpetual argument throughout the series about the nature of the Playgirl centerfold with the Indiana Jones guy that they show like 500 fucking times with his soft dick hanging out. He insists it's sexual. Why would you have that if you're not gay? He's a gay guy. There's a picture of a guy with his dick hanging out. And she's like, no, I'm the porn positive, progressive minded woman that understands these things. And none of this is sexual. This hints at something deeper. And no one treats this back and forth as a mystery in the show because it's not a fucking mystery. We know from the get-go who Jodie is. We know what her role is, and it's not to be the person in the show that's getting corrected or learning new lessons. So when the straight man says something repeatedly or with sincerity, I take it as a pretty obvious representation of what the writers believe to be true. The second one is the magical truth teller. Now, the manic pixie dream girl is an old trope in movies. It's the hyper, purple-haired, bubbly, whimsical female that comes and stirs up the life of the curmudgeonly old man and shows him the wonder of being open and not being such a prude. And that's kind of an offshoot of the trope of like the magical wizard that guides you, the person that's a little eccentric because they have esoteric knowledge, and that's what esoteric knowledge does. Now, this character might be the wackiest person in the bunch, but they're ultimately going to serve as a spirit guide. They're going to give sage advice. Their advice is infallible. It's like never fucking wrong. It always changes the main character's perspective. It gives them peace or allows them to solve a problem. It universally leads to a better outcome. And the story treats this character as a saint. Their wisdom might as well be carved into stone. Writers simply do not insert advice into the mouths of these characters unless they take it to heart, they believe it themselves to be true. In this show, we have Peter Sarsgaard as Chris Spurse, the cross-dressing owner of a roller rink who frequents the DTF app to have random hookups with men. While he's not exactly manic in this show, he is a little more reserved and quiet. We are supposed to take that as him being kind of sage and wise. He's insightful and free and authentically himself, which is, as you know, the highest form of existence that any human being can hope to achieve. And he starts out with a phrase that he repeats and eventually everyone in the show repeats, which is, no one's normal, it just looks that way from across the street. Now, the third way we know that the writers actually mean what is being said is sincere dramatic representation. This is when the camera slowly zooms in on the character's face. They're looking down, they're reflecting, and they're at the part of their brain where they're dealing with all their regrets. They're saying, I wish I would have done X, Y, or Z. I wish I would have told so-and-so how an amazing person they were. You get flashbacks flickering across the screen. You get a teary-eyed revelation that's delivered in a super serious and reflective monologue. And in these moments, the opacity of this fictional world drops way down, and you see the background, you see the philosophical bedrock, you see the moral underpinnings that prop up everything the writers think and feel, and it kind of pulls you out of it a little bit. It can seem a little ham-fisted. It's like, here's the lesson that you're supposed to take away, just served on a silver platter. Now, a few moments in the show fit this bill, but one that stands out to me is Jason Bateman's character, Clark Forrest, who is being questioned, and he's recounting to the detectives how wonderful Floyd was. And he keeps using that word wonderful as they show flashbacks of Floyd throughout his life and their friendship. He was wonderful. And it really comes across that despite Floyd's flaws in the show, he has traits that the people that put the show together desperately want you to see as being not just desirable, but almost so good that they can wash away the other negative traits that you ever had. So if I can safely assume that these characters in these moments are actually reflective of the writer's beliefs, and they're not just some kind of vague, open-ended investigation or questioning of hard to deal with topics, then I can start to piece them together and we can build out a set of beliefs that we can actually analyze and critique. Starting with sex and relationships, and this has always been and will always be the hallmark of progressive writers in any medium. It's like a mandatory thing. If you want to be part of this club, you have to treat sex as frivolous as possible. And you actually have to kind of convince people that not only is it not bad, it's actually good for you. I don't want to get off on a side rant here, but thinking about some of the shows, especially on HBO that I've seen over the years, they have characters in just the most disgusting circumstances where you're supposed to either not judge them or actually see it as a positive. And it's not about sex like always being wrong. It's about the fact that it is something that has consequences. It can be risky, and never, ever, ever treating the character like they should be behaving in a way that minds that fact. Like, I remember some years back watching a show about the kooky exploits of a single mom in New York. And like the first episode, she takes a guy back to her place to have sex on her messy bed, only for the guy to figure out that her 2-year-old was like asleep half a foot away from them, and he starts moving and he freaks out. Cue the Curb Your Enthusiasm music. Now, the main premise that sets everything into motion, it is Clark and Floyd meeting. They're both married, things aren't going well, they're not getting the sex they want from the wives, so they conspire to get on this app DTF. Of course, Clark, the one with the stable household who's actually productive and successful, he initiates and then convinces poor, empathetic Floyd to go along with it. Now, the show never treats him as the impulsive, manipulative piece of shit that he actually is for doing that. It spends little time with his family. You barely see his wife. I mean, it's all about his journey on the app, his emotional state, his relationship with Floyd. It's him. He's a disillusioned man, worn down by an unfair system that we're not going to specifically mention or look at. It's an unfair social order. So like Kevin Spacey in American Beauty, we are on board. We are eager to see this crash out because it's obviously justifiable. Now, as the suspense builds through the show, we're waiting for the shoe to drop for the big reveal to happen. Floyd finally reveals to Clark at the end of one episode, "I know you're fucking my wife." Now, of course, I quickly jumped to the next episode and was treated to a wet fart of a reveal as we find that kind, empathetic Floyd, the guy with the erectile dysfunction that's not having sex with his wife, he's more concerned with his wife's happiness, so he's cool about it. And Clark's his buddy, so he wants to talk about it, get everybody on the same page. Oh, and also he wants to watch. Now, the love triangle forms. Clark's relationship with Carol, which in the beginning we think is like all secretive and that Floyd doesn't know about it, it's shown as like liberating. And even though they hint heavily at her playing him in multiple different ways throughout the show, they always treat it as if he's somehow being nurtured by this affair in a way that he just wasn't getting at home. Now, I say nurtured, that means something essential. They're treating this as like very necessary, very essential exposure that if a man doesn't get, I mean, he's just gonna go insane. I mean, not having a woman sit on your face at a hotel on a weekly basis, that's basically how terrorism happens. Now, the sanctification of weird sex and how that's supposed to get reconciled with the danger or the consequences that happen as a result of sex, that's something that I've tried so hard to wrap my head around. I've tried to steelman what the other side believes and how they reconcile this, and it keeps coming up short. Like, if I think of a scenario, if a woman sleeps with her boss, you could look at that a couple ways. It could be like, oh, they're actually in love and you're rooting for them to be together and they have to find a way to overcome these stupid, meaningless corporate rules that don't serve anybody except to keep the main characters apart because they should be together. Or it could be the woman being empowered, using her sexuality to like kind of nerf the boss's male patriarchal elite class privilege that he has. Or just the opposite, it could be the guy in that situation being completely oppressive and manipulating the girl, who is his subordinate, to get whatever he wants. So it brings up questions. Is it exploitative? Is it reckless? And by who? Now, the answer to those questions depends entirely on who you decide to cast as the boss. And while there aren't going to be one clear set of rules for how people should navigate that, you can be certain that there will never be a rule that suggests that the female subordinate should have just never slept with her fucking boss. Sex is complicated, it has consequences, but it seems that the modern narratives are focused on always preserving maximal sexual freedom. And in service of that, consequences are always minimized or ignored, or they're placed at the feet of somebody else. Promiscuity, infidelity, it's never really treated as reckless or impulsive. It's always like the reasonable, logical, predictable byproduct of human beings just trying to get what they were unfairly being denied in some other circumstance. Or it's like an empowering assertion of human expression. I wasn't getting nourished, and daddy needs his nourishment. Now, my earliest experiences, the earliest impressions that formed my young malleable brain, it was movies, it was MTV, it was college instructors, it was my peer group. And the story that was getting repeated to me was that sex is human, it's natural, and things that are natural can't really be bad for you. And any attempt to put the governor on it was, at best, an unlikely waste of time, because you're gonna lose that battle anyways, kid, so you might as well just pull it out and start fapping. Or at worst was treated like an actual humanitarian crime. It's just so fucking bizarre at this age. I'm pushing 40 to have watched the trend of everyone I've known since high school, to watch the trend of society, the trend of statistics, and to still see the same aging Hollywood intellectuals and aging doctorate level activists trying to continue to push the same narrative about how sex and relationships should work in society. Dysfunction's running rampant, nobody's happy, and they're still sticking to their guns that weird sex is actually the spiritually grounding event that's missing from your life. It's a bit of an aside, but it reminds me of a distant family member on my wife's side, happens to be gay, and we're having a pleasant dinner one night at a big family event, and somehow the topic, shockingly, gets onto weird sex. Somebody brought up something about cucking, and I made like a passive observation. Like, it's actually a weird kink. It's one thing to have weird things that get you off, like popping balloons or looking at feet or whatever, but this one, it's actually counterproductive to the maintenance of a stable relationship. It's like if a race car driver had a fetish for bald tires. And it wasn't even that big of a point, but it ruffled this guy's feathers so much. He got that high-pitched, like, moral indignation and started to use the word fulfillment to describe what people experience from weird sex in general, but I guess specifically cucking. Well, if that's where they get fulfillment, who are you? And that's how I know that straight guys and gay guys aren't really all that different. We're working with the same hardware, because only a guy would, with a straight face, try to convince the rest of the world that weird unconventional orgasms are actually the secret to fulfillment. Now, this bleeds into another theme of the show, which is marriage and fatherhood. I mean, I guess we could just put family unit, what you should expect, how you should treat it, put a big bow on that. The start of the show with Clark and Floyd, we've got two men. They're both married. They both have kids in the picture. Clark has a stable life. He's successful. He's a weatherman in St. Louis. His face is on billboards. He's not getting laid because him and his wife are on different schedules, but they get along just great. Like, she calls him a great dad. He seems to be getting along with his daughters. He's got a robust work life. He's well known. He's always got, people at his house. Floyd is the one with the chaotic life. His son isn't his, it's his stepson. He's trying to build a connection with him, but he can't because he's always there with his SSRI face, just mindlessly chucking rocks at the side of a house in his stupid hunting vest that he won't take off. So the kid's got a personality disorder. Floyd's got like a mangled dick, so he has trouble keeping it hard, and it makes sex impossible. So he's not having sex with his wife, and he feels rejected, and he's drowning in debt, but he's still spending money on dance classes and foregoing job opportunities because he decided on a whim he wants to do sign language now. And he was previously married to a fortune teller, which I love because it's just one little bit of backstory that puts a pin in it and says, in case you were wondering, yeah, Floyd makes bad decisions. Now, Floyd is treated as more caring and open and empathetic of other people, but none of that really seems to be reserved for his wife or really for his role as the head of the household. He repeats in a very over-the-top way multiple times how important it was to be a good father, and it's kind of endearing at first that he's making himself open and available and vulnerable and trying so hard to be a positive figure in this young man's life. However, as time goes on, you start to wonder if that's actually the case and if it is so noble. I'm haunted by a particular scene where he's talking to his stepson, trying to connect to him finally. And he says, I always wanted to be this to somebody. And then I met your mom and she had you and it was perfect. Throughout this show, Floyd doesn't seem nearly as invested in his relationship with Carol as he does with fostering this relationship with his stepson. He almost sees her as just a means of getting to play that role. I mean, he doesn't even offer up a single bit of resistance when Clark starts banging her. In fact, he actually encourages it to keep going. But the thought of losing this like disturbed, borderline personality disorder kid who doesn't want anything to do with them, oh my God, that's giving him a rumbly tummy. Now, I can't guess what the intentions of the writers were because we're well past the territory likely of intentional decision making. So I might be just making speculation on speculation. Take it with a grain of salt. But as I continue on, I'm going to talk like it's the truest thing that's ever existed. The representation really just comes across as a man with a chaotic life, trying to make up for all of his failures, for his crippling insecurity, by somehow setting back the clock, getting a do-over. Like this is a clean slate and he can derive some purpose. He can siphon off some validation if only he could be to this kid what I guess he thinks he's never had. This is something that all fathers can relate to, even if only on a small level. But that doesn't make what Floyd is doing actual authentic parenting. Given that his stepson isn't biologically his and by all accounts hates his fucking guts, and the fact that Floyd's reckless past, his lack of success, his crippling insecurity, it's way more fitting that Floyd globbed onto his stepson as some type of therapy project. And he's just using his role as his stepfather to siphon some relevance or some validation from the whole experience. I mean, their connection is literally a forced connection. Then there's Clark, and this is really where the writer's intentions come through, I think, because Clark, he's ambivalent about his entire relationship. And so is the entire fucking show. We see his wife like maybe a handful of times. We see just enough scenes with her and him interacting with his daughters to know that he's a good dad who's present and he's in a healthy, productive, stable family unit where everybody's doing what they're supposed to do on a regular basis. But there is absolutely no care for any of the destruction that Clark wrought on his family through his impulsive actions. The only thing we see at the very end of the show is the empty house when mom takes the daughters and moves the fuck out. And of course, this aspect of Clark's story bleeds into the next theme, which is loneliness and what loneliness is. Male loneliness is a real thing. Men don't make friends fast or easy, and the opportunities to be around men where those connections usually get made, they are now becoming few and far between. Now, in the universe of the show, both men are treated as lonely. That's a theme for both of them, and this was, I think, one of the biggest reaches and one of the biggest failures. For Floyd being lonely, it makes a bit more sense. I mean, that can be kind of a byproduct of insecurity, and he's not connecting to his wife. They can't be intimate. His stepson is fucking rejecting him because throwing rocks at the house is more fun. His debts are piling up. He feels like a useless piece of shit. All right, I get how loneliness edges in there. But him and Clark become besties like in the first episode. Like their loneliness is fixed. They don't ever have a fight or falling out. The entire show, all the flashbacks is them doing everything together, riding their weird bikes, swimming, working out, doing stuff together, looking longingly into each other's eyes as they give compliments and tell each other how special they are. But you can't even call this show an example of the importance of male friendship because apparently even when you find the best, most supportive, most validating male friendship, it's not going to cure you from being a depressed, fat, nobody loves me sack of shit. I was waiting for the twist. I was waiting for the gayness to reach a crescendo in the show as they continuously hinted at some like deep connection between them. It just seemed to be going that way. And it kind of got there at the end of the show where Clark and Floyd are dancing in their underwear. Floyd's dancing for Clark because at this point in the story, Floyd is so absolutely insecure that he needs to see a guy get a hard on, even though technically he's not gay, because he just needs a validation to know he doesn't suck. And Clark's like, I'm your Huckleberry. And right where you think it's going, director's cut of Arrested Development, Clark sits on the ground, starts crying. He's like, I don't know what I'm fucking doing, man. I'm just so lonely. Now this is Clark in the show having the meltdown. You know, the weatherman who's on the billboards that's known by everybody in St. Louis. He's got the attractive wife. The two daughters seem to be in a supportive family unit. His daughters love him. His wife tells him he's a good dad. He's financially successful. Seems to regularly socialize with people at parties. He's even successful in fucking his friend's wife. And she spends the whole show bending over backwards to fulfill every weird fantasy he has. In the beginning of the show, it starts with him getting on DTF because he's not getting any sex. He's like, well, you know, I'm just a squirrel that needs a nut. But it ends with apparently him being so lonely after this long, deep, intimate friendship with Floyd that he's got to get down to his tighty whities and try to get hard just to make his buddy feel better. Because that's what loneliness does to a man. If you were lonely, which Clark isn't by any metric you could ever use to measure loneliness. That's why this fails as an investigation into male loneliness, because actual isolation is not the same as just dealing with turbulence from your own shitty choices. Now, Floyd's circumstances are tougher because of all the shit he's dealing with. He's not handling rejection well. The poor guy seems to be getting rejected left, right, and center, but he's written weirdly as a character. He suffers from being too good and too pathetic. His personal decision making is never featured front and center as like a reason for his strained marriage or for his crippling feelings of inadequacy. Like, if you're going to do an investigation into loneliness, and if this is supposed to be considered on that level of art, the next question is, why are they lonely? And no rational person is going to look at these two and say that it doesn't have something to do with them, the way they interpret reality, and the personal decisions they make. And God help me, I don't know why Clark wasn't featured outright as a villain on this show. I mean, you're supposed to be empathetic with his plight, with the lengths he's willing to go for Floyd to feel something to not be lonely. But the dude destroyed his own family. He convinced his friend to join a dating app to cheat on his wife while he's successfully fucking her, thinking he doesn't know about it. Then, despite the objective circumstances surrounding his life, has the balls to complain, "I'm so lonely, man." What separates a black comedy like Very Bad Things, where everybody featured is a despicable person and you're kind of waiting for everybody to just kill each other, is that this show insists on the emotional moments with the characters. It insists on humanizing them and revealing truth about the world that the writers believe through the moments with the characters. You're supposed to see them as human, as empathetic characters. You're supposed to see them as even having aspirational traits or as having circumstances that you might be able to relate to. But the truth is, if these two guys couldn't find happiness in their present circumstance, they weren't gonna fucking find it in any era ever. And for the epidemic of loneliness that's plaguing men, it deserves a better, more faithful investigation than whatever degenerate, abnormal bullshit we just got treated to. Like, seriously, zero insight was given to anybody. Now there's this question of what makes somebody wonderful, what makes somebody good. And I say wonderful because it's something that is routinely said throughout the show, specifically by Clark, Jason Bateman's character, in reference to Floyd, who, despite being painted as an obvious deadbeat, is held to the heights of almost sainthood for being empathetic, for being open, and for being non-aggressive. This is one of the serious dramatic scenes where you know the writer's feelings are bleeding through into the scene. Clark is being questioned by the detectives, and in telling them why he loved Floyd, why they were such good friends, he repeatedly describes him as wonderful. Not a nice guy, wonderful. Now, this description is in reference to the experience that Floyd had with Chris Spurse, the cross-dressing, manic, pixie, gay, roller rink owning wizard. Floyd saw him in drag on DTF, thought it was a lady, set up a date, goes to sit at, I don't know, a fucking Applebee's or something, and all of a sudden, old-ass Peter Sarsgaard shows up like, "Hey, what's good?" But Floyd isn't even shaken. He's not surprised. His voice doesn't change. He just says, "Hey, sit down. Everything's good here. I'm going to use the restroom." He is so concerned about people feeling bad that he takes it to a ridiculous degree to accommodate them. Now, in this universe, it kind of makes sense for Floyd's character. I mean, this is a weak guy. He's in debt, not being intimate with his wife, failing to connect to his stepson, and he's facing constant rejection through the DTF app. It tracks that somebody with low self-esteem with a string of failures, feeling the rejection, would be hypersensitive to other people's rejection and want to make sure that he never imposes that upon them. And he then kind of turns into a people pleaser. Kind of like that weird scene in White Lotus where Arnold Schwarzenegger's kid got jerked off by his brother, because he's a people pleaser. But what this show doesn't really go out of its way to point out is that this is pathological and maladaptive. This is dysfunction that somebody develops in order to deal with a problem that they have no other way of controlling. It's them grasping at straws. So pathological is Floyd's niceness that when Spurse asks him to French kiss in the parking lot, Floyd says, "Okay," and stands there completely passive while he proceeds to get his butt fingered. Now, this is a person that is so weak that they can't even defend their own personal boundaries against a sexual advance that they're not really into. So, of course, how are you going to defend the stuff that matters, like your marriage? Now, what stands out to me is that there are very obviously different scenarios where in the writer's room, if somebody proposed this, it wouldn't have flown. Change Floyd's identity to literally anything else and see how this scene hits. Is it the same if it's a woman? if it's a lesbian couple, if it's somebody of a different ethnic group? Is it the same if it's anybody that you actually identify with? Like, I can firmly say that I'm, again, at the level of over extrapolation. This is speculation on speculation. So yeah, grain of salt. But it seems that the reverence that Clark insists on and that the show gives Floyd's character is directly tied to his identity. You just would not see this encounter or this framing of this encounter as noble and wonderful with any other demographic. It just wouldn't fly. It's really hard not to see the show's insistence that Floyd was wonderful because he was that empathetic, he was that nice, as being kind of prescriptive for like how white guys should operate. It seems to insist that the peak of desirable traits are living completely for others, lowering yourself for the benefit of others, eliminating any aggression, disposing of your own self-preferences or interests. If you think I'm wrong, if you think it would hit exactly the same if two women showed up as if it were Floyd and the crossdresser from DTF, let me know in the comments. But regardless of the identity politic angle, let's just remove that altogether. I could safely say that these are not desirable traits. This is not what it is to be wonderful, to be so consumed with this fantasy of making yourself useful to other people while your entire life on the inside just dissolves and falls away. Those are pathological traits, and they can get so out of control that despite how nice you think you are, you do in fact become the bad guy. And I would argue very heavily that any man who's in a household that's overrun with debt, who has struggling relationships, who continues making these selfish missteps, is exactly that. Now this takes us to our final point, and this is a good one because this cuts to like the philosophical soft underbelly. That is the question of what normal even means. Now this ties into woke commentary, woke art, and that's going to trigger a lot of people. Good. Remember, this is art. Art's supposed to make you uncomfortable. You should be a little triggered here. But I'm about to hit you with junior college philosophy 101 freshman level of analysis. So you better strap yourself down because you're about to get blown away here. People often take issue with the term woke being assigned to some book or TV show or movie, and they often fire back with like, well, what is woke anyways? Is it every time you see something that's gay, you know, that guy's gay, is he woke? Is it just anything that's not conservative, anything you don't like? And this is actually a very fair point, because when you get comfortable throwing out this pejorative, this broad label, it waters it down. It's super easy to kind of forget what the core idea was, and people should never really feel bad for expecting further explanation. So I'm going to attempt to answer it and then talk about why this show is woke. Now, broadly, woke is just a pejorative for left-leaning views. In fact, you could probably just replace woke with leftist with like a snooty look on your face, and it would kind of convey the same information. Now, if we're going to be a bit more specific, I would say it's more really related to social stuff, specifically stemming from like critical theories. And without getting into the whole mishmash critical theory, it's just looking at things from a perspective of power. Language is messy, it's incomplete, it comes prepackaged with all kinds of assumptions. And if the people with influence, people in power, are making true statements about the world, that comes prepackaged with all their biases, and it's going to displace or suppress the experiences of other people. So we should think a bit harder about language and meaning and what objective truth even is. It's actually not fucking crazy from the start of it. It just sounds like basic skepticism. Instead of taking for granted that this statement means what you think it does, dig a little deeper, put on your skeptic hat. But of course, the popularity of it has transformed it into something else, and because it's used as a primary weapon of activists and academics, it's experienced and shitification. So basically, if we see something that calls to an investigation of identity through a lens of power structures, it's woke. It's woke as shit. That's what we mean. That's woke. Now, critical theories are influenced heavily by a lot of things, but postmodernism is one of them, which is basically just a rejection of objective narratives that are all encompassing. Again, true statements, where they're coming from, subtle bits of influence and bias and so on. But eventually the dipshit college students that haven't actually contributed an ounce to society, that sit in and eat this shit up from their do-nothing sociology professors, end up feeling that they're actually equipped to go into battle and fight these philosophical wars. And when they do that, they just come to believe that my experience is just as good as yours, therefore I invent my own reality. It basically ends up becoming nothing's actually objectively right or wrong. It's all relative to culture and identity and power structures and on and on and on. And that's really tempting to young dipshit college students that want to hear that they're the center of the universe. Their reality is just as valid as whatever's in that fucking science book over there, and don't ever actually have to do any hard work of analyzing where they went wrong. So now enter our resident manic pixie roller rink owning gay man, Chris Spurse, who isn't just gay, he's hyper open about sex, because it's not a weird boundary violation to tell an old man you just met that you're fantasizing about bathing him? No, that's you being your authentic self. Isn't that wonderful? I wish I could be so open, but I'm chained. I'm chained by the unfair, oppressive norms of society. And it's not weird to figure the butt of somebody who you know isn't into you in a public parking lot. That's not weird. No, that's just a beautiful expression of love and openness. It's not a red flag that random sexual encounters define your whole life. I could be so lucky. I mean, look at this fucking guy sitting in a sofa in the middle of a roller rink. He's like some type of rainbow flag mafioso. And the important takeaway is that you need this level of openness, this level of whimsy, if you actually want to defeat the final boss of frigid puritanical oppression. Start taking notes, breeders. Now he starts a phrase in the show, and it's one that he repeats, and then he gets other people to repeat, and that is, no one is normal. It just looks that way from across the street. And it sounds like one of those catchy things that the soda jerk at the ice cream shop would have said to you, you know, one elbow on the counter. He's got his little like white hat on, and he's just telling the kid, nobody's normal. They just look that way from across the street. And then he winks. And then it cuts to like a black and white Avon commercial. And it gets repeated so many times in an obvious, serious tone. Like, this is the takeaway from the show. Here, we made a little catchy phrase for you to take, that any reasonable person is going to interpret it as absolute cope. It's cope for the absolutely not normal shit that Clark and Floyd and Carol get into. And by extension, if we're to believe the writers took this show seriously at all, it's cope from the fucking writers. I stand by the beginning of this bitch fest. When I said the show's great, it does a lot of things really well. It really does. But this is like where it fucks up in a big way. Aside from it promoting a view of the world that is dysfunctional and unable to construct anything that is stable and healthy and productive and enduring, it really is the fourth wall breaking that bothers me. It pulls you out of the immersive experience. This is the writers speaking directly to you, and they use repetition not because it was like a really interesting story device. It's because this is the moral of the story. It's the math teacher giving you an acronym that they say over and over and over that they hope you remember because this will be on the final exam. If there's one thing I can say conclusively the writer believes, it is this stupid nothing fucking phrase. And it's emblematic of this entire cast of people, how they create their own reality and they come up with just the most horrible fucking rationalizations to make it not just okay, but actually quite intellectual if you think about it. It feels like they were filming the scene and then the writer just walked in front of the camera with a megaphone and just started yelling over Linda Cardellini, no one's normal, it just looks that way from across the street. It's just one big self-soothe. And it's stupid anyways because normal is actually mathematical in nature. It's a measurable thing. It's not a vibe. It's not qualitative. It's a true blue statistical representation when you have a big population of something. That's why they call a bell curve a normal distribution curve. Doesn't matter what trait it is, height or personality or how many times you have threesomes throughout the week. You can plot it in a graph. There's going to be a center arena that most people fall under, and that's what you call normal. And as you break off, it becomes more and more rare. So even if everybody in the world has a kink, you could still quantify those kinks by being more or less normal. Like group sex or cosplay. Those are going to be more normal kinks than something like having your face fucked by an 800-pound gorilla. But the theme of postmodernists, and specifically of this writer, is to deconstruct your idea of what normal is, because if it pushes back against them, if it limits any amount of sexual freedom, it is by definition oppressive. It doesn't matter that they're not giving you a prescription of when too much actually is too much, because rational people will agree that that's a thing, but that's not their fucking problem. They're not going to be the ones to tell you what the limit is because that makes them the oppressor. Fuck that shit. I'm just going to keep supporting you in whatever degeneracy you want to do. I mean, the show doesn't even actually deconstruct what normal is. It just shows characters behaving in retarded ways and then has the cast members say like 6 or 7 times, normal isn't actually a thing, you know? Now we also have this reinforced by our straight man. Back to Jody, the kind of deadpan, expressionless person who's there specifically to set straight old white detective Homer. In the very beginning of the show, she informs Homer that she is porn positive, because that's an important thing to know about her. She likes her pornography and she's up to date on all of the coolest trends. And she ends up correcting him about an assumption he had about a picture that Floyd was holding when he was found dead. The picture is a Playgirl centerfold. It's a dude with his cock out. And by the way, they show cocks like 9,000 times in the show. It's grating because it's there to give you a reaction. It's something like literally no people want to see. Guys don't want to see it. Girls typically don't want to see it. I mean, do they worry about that? They're thinking about making the men uncomfortable, being like, what are you, homophobic? A dick makes you uncomfortable, bro? Come on. Isn't there anybody that's like, hey, we're assaulting like millions of female viewers with these completely unprompted pictures of graphic male genitalia? Man, it's so hard to keep straight who the victim is. I just find that grating because I know what they're trying to do. It's like intentional activism. The most nip we got was Linda Cardellini and kind of a semi see-through top, which is all right. She's doing pretty well for herself. I gotta say, I never thought I'd be seeing Velma in this light, but I'm here for it. But that's like all we get. But then you see like every episode, they're searching like gay Indiana Jones and showing you the guys bent over, like fisting themselves, the comically huge dicks. They did the same shit in The Boys because fucking Kripke is such a dildo. It was some type of like retribution for decades of objectifying the female body. So they don't show any female nudity, but every episode is like dicks exploding. You're seeing a guy's dick and it's getting burnt off or smashed or exploded. That is the mindset of the people that write this shit. But anyways, Jody, the straight man, back to what we were talking about. Now, eventually at the end of the show, they show them on the porch reminiscing about the case that they solved. And she's educating Homer about different sex kinks, like informing him about what different things people like. And she probes it. There's got to be something. Everybody has something, which again is that insistence that everybody's weird. Everybody has a kink and one isn't different or fundamentally like worse than the other. It's to normalize infinite differences between people. It's one thing to say that human sexual behavior is different in real life, like in real objective terms, than some groups might want you to treat it. I understand that fully. That's accurate. I'm sure if we were to open up everybody's mind and break open their Jack Shack and see what they were working with, and if we were to catalog it like Minority Report, throw it all up there, put it under a graph, it would probably shift our ideas of what normal was. But again, there would still be a normal and there would still be extremes, and also what that normal is hinges on society. So many people are going to fight against this, even though they're like kind of blank slate environmentalists that think environment does shape everything. Like surely a fair amount of the categories on Pornhub probably didn't exist in like the 1850s. A society that routinely tells itself that sex is validating in all forms, that promotes the continued search for ever more stimulating material, all while insisting that normal doesn't exist, is eventually going to find itself in a self-fulfilling prophecy. So that's all I got for today, guys. And the funny thing is, like, I mean, the show was pretty good. It was an enjoyable watch, except for the things that made me think of all of this shit, which was most of it. However, that in kind of a perverse way increased enjoyment because it gets me thinking about things like this. And that's obvious by the millions of words that I just dumped on the screen. So let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks so much for suffering through this if you made it this far. Until next time, this is Bromley. I'll see you.